Hey everyone, TJB Chris here. Welcome back to the Kids Table of YouTube. I'm doing what non-profit making Kids Table podunk channels can do. I'm sitting here in my computer room in my PJs because I get to do videos in my PJs when this isn't my living, folks. And in fact, I actually just figured out that I have a hole in my sock. So yeah, it's the Kids Table, friends. Anyway, I'm sitting here at the Kids Table and I'm doing something I used to do a lot back in the 1980s. I'm looking at my 1988 and also my 1987 Radio Shack catalogs, and specifically I'm opened up to the CoCo section. And I learned, cut my teeth, everything I know, I learned on the CoCo. It's really the foundational basis of it. In fact, I love the CoCo so much that when I was giving my VIS talk at Tandy Assembly in 2025, I said this. I contend, and will meet you by the bike racks to defend, that the CoCo 3 is the best 8-bit computer someone growing up in the late 80s could have had because of the combination of real operating system with things like pipes and processes and even a security layer versus some of the other 8-bit micros, your Commodore 64s, your Apple IIs, and the like. And I still stand by that statement today. In fact, I will meet you by the bike racks after school if you don't agree. Anyway, the CoCo 3 is an awesome computer, but I used to look lovingly through the catalog and daydream about all the various peripherals that we didn't have. You see, we built my CoCo piecemeal over the years. We got the CoCo, and then we got the CM8 later, and then later the floppy drive. Then later the 512K upgrade. I never had a multi-pack interface or speech sound pack or deluxe RS232 pack or a modem pack or any of that stuff. But I used to sit here and daydream, especially about a multi-pack interface and about a quirky little interesting item on the bottom left corner of page 163 of the 1988 catalog, and that is the hard disk interface. Or as they put on the thing itself, I guess it says the hard disk controller, but we'll talk about that. The hard disk interface is one of those things that I looked at and went, you could get a hard disk with a CoCo? Now this was well beyond my reach. We were never going to have anywhere near that kind of bougie bucks to have a hard disk CoCo, and I have dreamed of using one forever. Fueling the fire, of course, was CoCo software like the Interbank Incident and other software that I did have at the time that did mention hard disks. In fact, take a look at the King's Quest III reference card that has this whole convoluted thing for converting the multi-sided game onto hard disk. That just made me want one more, and it made me really curious. As I learned more about OS 9 and the color computer, I learned more about the hard disk support, but it was never something that was in my grasp. Now, it turns out for the last 7 or 8 years, I have had almost everything necessary to build a CoCo hard disk system. Just didn't have the hard disk interface. And it turns out those are fairly rare these days, and the folks that have them. They're not getting rid of them. So there's not really any way, barring one showing up on eBay randomly, but that hasn't happened. But I've always wanted to do this. So I finally asked around, and thanks to the generosity and spirit of the CoCo community, which if you haven't experienced, you should go do that, I now have this in hand. This is the Tandy official color computer hard disk controller, but it's not really a controller. This is 26-3145 for $129.95. You could connect any of Tandy's primary drives, which you've seen before on the channel, to your color computer and turn it into a hard disk system. Now, it's got some limitations. We'll talk about those as we go. But before we do that, I can hear you already. And in paraphrasing a couple of conversations I really did have, but TJB Chris, your inner monologue is going, and possibly your outer monologue, if you're to talk to your screen types. Why would you want to do this? Why don't you just, it's 2026, use a CoCo SDC, or a Super IDE, or FujiNet, or DriveWire, or PyDriveWire, or blah, blah, blah. Honestly, fair questions. You're not wrong. And in my day-to-day CoCoing, I do use the CoCo SDC. This is my CoCo SDC, which I printed a little Tandy-esque case for. I love it. It's an easy button solution to getting software on the CoCo, having a hard disk with OS 9 on it, everything. It's great. CoCoing today, and in fact doing any of these retro computers today, is barely reflective of the day-to-day life and experience of working with your color computer. Let's face it. You can go to the CoCo archive. You can download the entire archive, drop it onto an SD card. Anyone can do it. You plug the thing into your CoCo, multi-pack or not, and you've got yourself a full-fledged hard disk system with all the options. You want to dork out on OS 9 like someone like me? Get yourself a copy of Nitrous 9 EOU. Gives you best of everything. Easy buttons for users that just want to play with the OS 9 software, and all the great tools and compilers and assemblers and utilities for people like me. It's great, and my day-to-day CoCo life is that. But it doesn't reflect what life was like with the CoCo, and especially with a hard disk. The barrier to entry is much lower now than it was then, and I don't think we can really appreciate where we are now if we don't really have a good comparison point, if we can't see what it was like then. Living with the CoCo, getting software onto it, working with a hard disk is, as they would say in airplane,
it's an entirely different kind of flying, altogether.
It's an entirely different kind of flying.
It's an entirely different kind of flying. Anyway, so that's one. And then the other reason is I just wanted to. I've wanted to do this since I was a kid. And kid me is in here right now going, woohoo! Because I get to do this. And the reason I get to do this is because I have this little gem on loan thanks to a very generous loan out from another member of the CoCo community, Brian Weisler. Thank you so much for this. Honestly, this is awesome. These are rare devices, and I'm really, really happy to have this one in hand for now to be able to play with and show you. So, with all that in mind, I realize there's some commentary there, and believe me when I say, you know, I often do my, whoa, why would you do that voice? I don't judge people asking me the questions. It's a fair question. Okay, folks, I'm going to get my feet down because I can't feel them anymore, and then we're going to talk about some ground rules. All right, folks, a few ground rules now that I have circulation back to my feet. This is going to be an entirely Radio Shack exercise. If you can't find it in this catalog from 1987, or this one from 1988, or the Tandy computer catalog, yes, this is the October 1986 issue of 80 Micro Magazine, but it is also a full copy in the middle of the 1987 Tandy computer catalog. See if I can find the cover page for you there. I'll put it up on screen. But if you have the October 1986 issue of 80 Micro, you have the Tandy computer catalog. That is really cool. Don't know if they did it again, but anyway. So this is all Radio Shack. And I realize if you pick up a publication at the time like this, January 1988 copy of the Rainbow, the Color Computer Monthly Magazine, you will find vendors that had all sorts of things. Multi-packs, like the slot pack from Howard Medical, or the Burke & Burke CoCo XT hard disk controller, or the Owlware had one, and they even had a solution that worked with BASIC. If you find it in this, but it doesn't say Radio Shack on it, I'm not buying it. We're going completely from the catalog, and that's because Kid Me had this, and also because, I want to give Radio Shack all the money. Okay, so that's it. Also, no sale prices. What you're going to see are generally prices from the 1988 catalog. I will note when we were talking about what we're going to buy here, when it's 1987. We're not going to do sale prices, and we're not going to do any third-party suppliers. I realize there were wholesalers that sold Tandy computers through the years for less than Radio Shack did, and that included accessories. But that's not what we're going to do. We're going to stick with catalog pricing. It's going to simplify things. I get it. I know those things are out there, but as George Carlin says, these are my rules. I make them up. Okay, so that's it. I think now that we have all of this aside, it's time to get our CoCo. And there's only one way to do that. If we're going to go and get our CoCo, we've got to go to Radio Shack. Hey friends, welcome to Radio Shack of the 1980s. I've made a crude remake with some green screen magic and a scene I took from a Radio Shack sales support training video that I found here. And that video had a Color Computer 2 CoCo section. It was the only one I could find in some looking. And I realize it's blurry, but it's going to have to be better than nothing, friends. And of course, over here, you can see we've got our Color Computer 2 section. Got a little gondola here, down here with some software. More software above the Color Computer, and we've got some accessories and things. And of course, over here, we've got our Tandy 1000 section, including manuals and additional software and documentation. And you can see in there, hidden in there, a Getting Started with Extended Color Basic book for the Color Computer. And of course, we've got some printers and stuff. Now, I realize we're going to be buying for the Color Computer 3. And this store is probably from 84 or 85, but you're just going to have to suspend disbelief and bear with me, friends, because this is the best I could come up with. And of course, what trip to Radio Shack would be complete without my Radio Shack CityLine credit card? Yes, if you're going to buy from Radio Shack on credit with easy payments and easy terms, you want your Radio Shack CityLine credit card issued by Citibank. Now, this card is actually styled after the actual card at the time. This is what the card looked like. I got the name and the account number backwards, and it would be embossed, but this is a 3D printed facsimile, folks. This is what happens when you give me a 3D printer. Anyway, I've got my CityLine credit card, which is going to make my Radio Shack salesmaker drool and save them the spiel of trying to sell me on the stupid card. So, I also have with me a little cheat card. This is one of my shopping channel, TJB Shopping Network cards, and I have upon it a list of everything I'm going to need to make my bougie CoCo system. Now, this isn't just a buy everything that says Color Computer on it and call it bougie. This is a particularly configured system with a hard disk, and it has everything necessary for a high-end professional development or other good CoCo system that you would use for some business activity. Now, I did not get a printer with this, only because Neither of the printers I have a CoCo serial port, and not every CoCo configuration had a printer. If you decide you want a printer, feel free to add on the cost to whatever I put at the end here when I give you the full tally. Speaking of which, as we're going through this list, I'm going to put the catalog here, and I'm going to put the list of things we've purchased here. And as I go through the list, we'll update the list. And finally, we'll do a final tally of the cost, and we may even adjust that for inflation for you. Anyway, without further ado, here's the list. First up, of course, you can't have a great high-end color computer system without a color computer. So, of course, we're buying a 128K Color Computer 3. Again, from Radio Shack, you could only get them in 128K configurations. So, if you wanted more memory, that was extra. So that's $199.95. It started out at $219.95 in the original 87 catalog, but by the time the revised one came along and 88 came along, it was $199.95. I should mention, all prices, unless otherwise noted, are from the 1988 catalog. So I will note and display 1987 catalog when necessary. Otherwise, we're talking 1988 catalog if you're following along at home. Okay, next up, to use the hard disk, we're going to need OS 9, and quite frankly, OS 9 on the Color Computer 3 is barely functional with 128K. You're not going to get much done, not many screen windows, not a lot of applications running or anything like that. To make the best of the Color Computer as purchased from Radio Shack, you're going to need a 512K RAM upgrade kit, $149.95. Now, an important note on the 512K RAM upgrade, when Radio Shack sold it earlier on, it appears to have come with the RAM. Later on, it definitely did not, and catalog listings would say things like 512K RAM board 0K or less RAM. And this was an indication that you got the board only, and you had to order the RAM later. This assumes that the RAM is included, given the $149.95 price. If it's not, add about $70 to $100. Next up, if we're going to build a high-end CoCo system, why are we going to pair it with some crappy television? What we need is a high-end display, and the best one from Radio Shack is the CM8 monitor. If we're going to get the best of the color and the best of the resolution that Radio Shack has to offer. And of course, that costs more than the computer at $219.95. Next up, we're going to need something onto which we're going to place this monitor. A pile of books will not do, and it can't just sit behind the computer. High-end system, it's got to look the part, folks. So we're going to buy the monitor platform, but it's only $29.95. Now, the next item up for bids isn't necessarily required for a hard disk setup, but all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, if you know what I mean. And quite frankly, I want to be like that father in the Tandy 1000 commercials. You know, the guy who's doing all the family budgets and deskmate and bringing his work home, but they can't get him upstairs for bed because he's playing games and zapping aliens on his Tandy 1000 late at night. That was a commercial, probably from right around then, maybe a little later. Anyway, I want to be that guy, but with my color computer, and some of the best games are on cassette. Therefore, we need a CCR81 cassette recorder for $59.95. And not for nothing, it is OS 9 related. You can boot OS 9 from a CCR81. Ask me how I know. Next up, if we're going to use a hard drive requires OS 9, which requires a floppy disk on the color computer. Therefore, we're going to need a multi-pack interface. Now, at $99.95, this does not include the price of the necessary PAL upgrade to use the multi-pack interface with a Color Computer 3 and OS 9. So, probably want to add about 50 or so bucks. I couldn't find a definitive price, but you will need that PAL upgrade or things will go sideways. There's some ghosting of the addresses and things in there. Next up, of course, OS 9 for the Color Computer, generally speaking, runs on disks. It needs a disk drive, so we're going to need FD502 Disk Drive Kit number 0. That includes the drive, enclosure, power supply, and the plug-in program pack that is the controller for the floppy drive. Now, just like OS 9's not great with 128K RAM, it's also not the best with a single floppy drive, especially when you're trying to configure the operating system for new hardware. You really want that second drive. Life is so much easier in OS 9, even if you don't have a hard drive, if you have two floppy drives. Therefore, FD502 secondary drive kit, and that's going to add another $179.95 to the price. Next up, one of the two pieces that makes the meat of the CoCo hard disk system, and that is the Tandy hard disk controller, 26-3145. This $129.95 item is the interface between the color computer and the hard drive. Next up, the single most expensive item on the list. This is going to come from the 1987 catalog, and this is the 35 meg primary drive for a whopping $2,995. This is the same drive you would use on a Model 3 or 4 or a Model 2, 12, or 16 with the Type 2 or 12, 15 meg hard drive interface board. And so this drive is the primary drive, as I mentioned, and the way that you can tell the primary drive is by whether or not it has a key, and by when looking at the back, it has a computer import or not. Next up, because we're not done shopping yet, I also want to make use of the wild world of online communication, possibly even use some additional serial devices and printers, so we're going to get the Deluxe RS-232 pack, which is OS 9 compatible. And this is $79.95. Now, back to the all work and no play statement before, we're going to add a speech sound pack because some games, I think the Interbank Incident and some others, uses it, and I want this because when it's time to play games on my color computer, I want to do it in style. And I didn't have a speech sound pack growing up. I do now. Next up, we're going to want a deluxe joystick with which to play all those games. I want the option to free float or self-center, and the deluxe 2-button joystick plus the color computer 3 is a winning combination. I like it a little better than the pistol grip joystick, though not a bad second choice. So we're going to go with deluxe joystick, $29.95. Next up, we're going to want a color mouse. Now by this time, it was the deluxe color mouse. The one I have is the single button color mouse. That's what you're going to see later. Pretty much the same price back when they were in their respective catalogs. But if you were to buy it in 1987, you're going to get the deluxe color mouse with 2 buttons. Now, when you're working with disk operating systems like OS 9 and you're making backups and you're creating boot disks for your hard drive and things like that, you're going to need some diskettes. So we're going to get a 10-pack of double-sided, double-density, 5¼ diskettes, $12.95. I haven't listed all the prices, but you see them down there. Next up, I'm going to need a place into which I can store all those diskettes. I don't want to just leave them strewn about. They could get damaged or something. So we're going to get ourselves a diskette storage box for $14.95. Next up, of course, the hard drive doesn't work without OS 9 Level 2, and you can't run OS 9 Level 2 without OS 9 Level 2. So we're going to buy that. $69.95. But there's a rub, friends. You'd think that'd be all we need because OS 9, it's got drivers, supports hardware, everything like that. There's something crucially missing from OS 9. Yeah, Level 2 does not include the hard disk driver. Level 2 does not include the hard disk driver descriptors to use a hard disk. If you want to use a hard disk with OS 9 Level 2 from Tandy, you have to spend an additional $99.95 and buy the OS 9 Level 2 development system. Now, not only does that include the hard disk software, it also includes some of the multi-user software like Login, TSMon, the password file, some other cool stuff. So if you want to really turn your hard disk CoCo into a multi-user system, you still want the OS 9 development kit anyway, but you need it if you want to be able to use the hard drive with your CoCo, at least as it is from Tandy. So there we go. All of those items, priced in $1987, October 1987, come to a grand total of, and I can see my sales maker over there drooling and salivating, $4,802.15. Tell me that's not going to make a DM or an RM's month. Okay, and finally, adjusted for inflation. So back when I ran these numbers, the latest date available is December 2025. Adjusted for inflation, if I bought this CoCo system with today's dollars, it would cost me, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, $13,496.58. Cha-ching. Well then, that's the CoCo system we need. So I'm going to go pester my sales maker off camera, make him or her a very happy person. They're going to immediately get on the phone with their regional manager and tell them what kind of a sucker came in and just put them in the pages of Intercom magazine with a color computer. And then I'm going to take this stuff, get it home, and we're going to set it all up. Now I should point out that back in this time, much of this stuff would have been special order, or as we would have called it them, CMC, Consumer Mail Center. So some of these things you would have walked out of the store with, the color computer for sure, and probably the cassette recorder, and maybe the floppy drive. But some of it you would have been waiting for the store to call you and tell you it's here. And honestly, it probably wouldn't have all come at the same time. So I'll break out my CityLine Radio Shack credit card, talk to my sales maker, and we'll see you back at the computer room. Now that we're back from Radio Shack, and before we get setting everything up, I need to talk to you a little bit about some terminology and what we're looking at and what all this hardware actually is. Because, as I kind of air quoted before, this is not really a controller. I know it says controller right on there, but it's not. This is an interface. It is an adapter. This adapts the CoCo's bus to the bus used for the Tandy primary drives, which happens to be, signal-wise, basically a TRS-80 Model 3 bus. It is the equivalent of this. This is the Type 2 HDA, unofficially, or the 12 or 15 meg interface board for the TRS-80 Model 2 line systems. Now, this has an extra 16K of RAM on it, but this does the same thing. It adapts the Model 2 bus over to the computer in jack on the back of the primary drive, which again is a Model 3 bus. So this and this are equivalent. So this actually only has 3 ICs on it, believe it or not. So, and a few caps. It's $129 for a large board, 3 ICs, and 3 or 4 caps. So this is not a controller. And this is where I'm going to have to talk a little about controllers too. So the Tandy primary drives have a controller board inside the drive. It's basically like an overgrown IDE drive. You can tell a primary drive because it has a computer in jack on the back of it. If it doesn't have a computer in jack on the back of it, this ain't going to work. Okay. Now, there are 2 relevant controller types for the Tandy primary drives, and only one of them is guaranteed to work. So the later boards that were available in the hard drives by the time this little gem came along would be what we call the WD1000-TB1 boards that you're looking at now. These are easily identified either by taking the top off the controller. As you can see here, the board is only half the width of the computer, or of the chassis. That is a WD1000-TB1, and it says it right on the silk screen. The other way you can sometimes tell is, I believe the catalog number has a W at the end of it. It's like 26-4155W for the 15 megger. 35 and 70 meg drives, the later drives from Tandy, should just be the WD1000-TB1. But double check. The older controller is, the controller board is the width of the chassis, and it is called the 8X300. And that's because it's got an 8X300, for lack of a better word, microcontroller emulating a WD series controller chip. The differences were stark enough that there were actually different versions of Tristos 2 for the Model 2 and 12 for the different controllers. So if you wanted to run a WD1000-TB1 with a WD1010 chip on it, you had to run Tristos 425. If you wanted to run the 8X300 based wideboard controller, as I like to call it, then you had to run Tristos 4.2.6. It wasn't until the unreleased Tristos 4.4 surfaced that we got a release that supports both in one. Now, this is irrelevant to Xenix, by the way, for those machines. This same difference is going to matter to OS 9. OS 9 is the only way to use a hard disk with this solution on the CoCo. There's no basic support, and OS 9 specifically was written to support the WD1000-TB1, the shortboard controller. So you might be able to get an 8X300 working, but if you're following along and you have one of these, if you'd have a 8X300 board, don't expect success. So you're going to need the WD1000-TB1 boards. Fortunately, these primary drives do show up on eBay a fair amount, but you're going to have to get the seller to take the cover off and take a look, especially if it's an earlier drive like a 5, 12, or 15 meg drive. In fact, 5 and 12 meg drives are probably almost exclusively going to be the 8X300s. The 15 meg drives is where the transition happened. I have one of each. I have a wide board and a narrow board one. And then the later drives, 35, 70 megs, the one that said Tandy on them, are more likely to be the controller you want. So anyway, that's that. And again, if it doesn't have a computer in jack on it, it's not going to be relevant. Okay, I didn't expect to have to go into the hard drive thing if both were going to work. Maybe if I do, I'll update you here. But just understand, your mileage may vary. I realize I've been talking a lot. Let's actually set this up. All right, folks, well, now that everything is all set up and ready from a hardware standpoint, we have the bougie OG CoCo hard disk system, period correct from the 80s. I think it's time we get down and dirty with our friend here and set up OS 9. We've got to configure the operating system, make a boot disk, we've got to format the hard drive, and then we'll take it for a spin and see what life was like with OS 9 on a hard disk. Now, as I mentioned, OS 9 Level 1 version 2 or OS 9 Level 2, any version are necessary if you want to do this and you're following along. Today we're going to be using OS 9 Level 2 because we're on a Color Computer 3. But you CoCo 1 and 2 folks, download OS 9 Level 1 version 2.0.0 from the Color Computer archive if you'd like to play along. I forgot. Yeah. Speech sound pack. Deluxe RS-232 pack. All right, folks, before we get started, I just wanted to show you some cool stuff I got here. This wouldn't be period correct if I didn't have all of the manuals and stuff for most of this stuff. I have manuals for everything here. I don't think I have the speech sound pack. I don't have the CM8. I don't have the joystick. Somewhere I've got a primary drive book floating around, but I have the original manual set for the CoCo 3. Now, this is not my original manual set. I have my originals. I use the extended basic book so much, it's broken into sections. The spine broke apart. And we also have the Deluxe RS-232 pack manual. This is the old Radio Shack one. Then these are from when I was a kid. These are my original disk system manual and quick reference guide that came with the FD502. This is my original FD502, original CM8 and CoCo, by the way. Of course, you've seen my knockoff hard disk manual. And with it, we have the CCR81 cassette manual. We'll see why later. Then I have the OS 9 Level 2 binder, complete with the diskettes and everything, the license and or the version log card. It's got the paper on the back still. Now, this manual was a little dumb. I love these binders. These things are great. The problem is, Tandy didn't make the binder big enough for the stupid manual. That's why you'll see on eBay these things, the binder covers like bent over and just totally wrecked. Yeah, it's because they freaking didn't make the manual big enough. So I had to sacrifice the basic 09 section. I have to keep that in a bag someplace and track it just so I could have this out. Very cool, though. And then finally, I ordered the OS 9 Level 2 development system fairly late. So it actually came like this. If you got software from Tandy anytime after like 91, 92 when the CoCo was discontinued, once the stock ran out, they would duplicate you the disk. They would sell you a disk with a dot matrix printed label. I'll show you that later. And a photocopied manual. My DeskMate 3 manual was like this. I have a real multi-view finally, but when I originally got multi-view, same thing. But now I have the binder for that. Anyway, let's get to this. So I'm going to save you the trouble of watching me make the backups of my OS 9 System Master, Basic 09, and Development System diskettes. I've already done that. So we're going to open up my wonderful disk container here, flip back to the second thing, and I'm going to put my OS 9 Level 2 System Master disk, labeled 1 here, into the drive, and we're going to boot the CoCo. Now, folks, you're going to have to pardon me on the screen cap. I'm sorry, it's the composite out on a color computer. It's what we got because I'm using the better port for my CM8. But you'll get the gist. Probably that means we're going to be sticking with 32 column screens, but that's not really a big deal for this. All right, OS 9 is going to start now. For this, again, this is 1987, friends. So I'm using OS 9 Level 2. Version 2.00.01. This is the version you can find in the Color Computer Archive. I'm just going to push enter at the date because the date is useless. Okay. Now here's what we have to do. First thing I want to do is I want to format a diskette to use as a hard drive boot diskette. Once we get this all set up, we get the drive formatted, I'm going to need a diskette to do that. And I'm going to make you watch this part because OS 9 is fun. So we're going to load that disk into drive D1, and we're going to format D1. Okay, Color Computer Formatter, formatting drive D1. Ready? Yes. And it's over there clicking away. And my laptop's over there, so if you see me pointing over there or looking, that's what's happening. And while this is going, again, OS 9 Level 1 version 2, if you have a CoCo 1 or 2, this is going to be OS 9 HG boot, not boot, OOT. Yeah, true lowercase. And we're going to go through and we're going to verify the sectors, and if everything comes out, we should have $276 hex, 276 sectors free. So again, you can do this on a CoCo 1 or 2 with 64K with OS 9 Level 1 version 2. In fact, the process is going to be almost exactly the same. The utility I'm going to use to make the OS 9 diskette is actually, the custom boot file is actually a bit of an easy button that was introduced with Level 1 version 2, and it carried over into Level 2. Now, it's not as customizable as doing it the hard way, but it does work fairly well. Okay, now we have our boot diskette. Okay, fun difference between OS 9 Level 1 and Level 2, if you're following along. OS 9 Level 1 includes all the drivers you need for the hard disk with the release from Radio Shack. The second disk has everything on it. It also has the driver and descriptors for the 15 and 35 meg drives that Tandy supported out of the box. OS 9 Level 2 does not. In fact, neither manual mentions much about hard disk. The Level 1 version 2 manual mentions hard disk support in Appendix E and outlines the driver and descriptor format, but gives you no information on how to format or set the thing up. And the Level 2 manual, as far as I could tell, poking around, says nothing. Zilch. And it even says the format utilities for floppy disks. We'll see that that's BS in a minute. So the first thing we have to do is copy the drivers from the development system. And that's why you need the friggin' development system. Ironically, the development system manual says nothing about hard drives either, other than mentioning the park utility. So to do that, we're going to drop our Basic 09 config and what is it, boot diskette, OS 9 boot, into drive D1. I think copy is already loaded. Let's make sure. It is, okay. And in drive D0, we're going to insert development system disk 1. If I can get it out. Okay. And since copy is already loaded into memory, we're going to copy D0 modules. And this is going to be cc3hdisk.dr d1 modules. Again, get a camera on me. I can't type. We're copying. Okay, now we have to copy not one but two device descriptors over to drive 1. So we're going to do ddh0 underbar, that's control dash 35.dd d1 modules ddh0 35.dd. And yes, I'm being explicit in my path names and file names. It's what I tend to do. Now this is the DD or default drive descriptor for the DD drive. OS 9 Level 1 may not have this. I don't know that OS 9 Level 1 came with a default drive descriptor or even used DD for most things, but OS 9 Level 2 does, and you should use it. Software does make use of it, especially help and error, the help message and error message files. It's going to use the default drive descriptor. D0 modules, H0, 35.dd. Oh, I did that. 35.dd. I hit shift, not control. D1 modules, H0, 35.dd. And then we're going to do one more thing, just for the sake of my edification. All right, system master back in the drive in case we need it. Now, if I do my dir d1 modules, I should have my new modules. And you'll see a bunch of others here. So we've got a whole bunch of window descriptors, and we've got the terminal VDG descriptors, and we've got the drives G0, 35S, single-sided, 40D, that's 40-track double-sided, like my FD502 here. And there's even 80-track drive support in there. Now, let's get to making our custom boot disk. And to configure the OS 9 boot disk for a hard drive, we have to get those drivers and descriptors we just loaded into an OS 9 boot file. They have to be present when the system starts. Now, if you want to, you could manually load them every time, put them in startup or something like that and load them manually. But really, they're meant to be in your boot file, and OS 9 has a little trick up its sleeve that makes your life easier if you actually add them to the boot file. Now, historically, you could use Cobbler or OS 9 Gen or the like to make the boot file, but starting with OS 9 Level 1, version 2, Tandy included a really nifty utility called config. And config also carries over to Level 2. Config is a somewhat easy way to customize your machine. You don't get full customization over the OS 9 boot files. It's kind of pre-selected. It's really meant to be an easy button to take the difficulty of customizing your boot file for simple hardware changes off of the user, make it more accessible. But it is not the most flexible. So you could use something like EasyGen, third-party utility I've used on this channel before, or like I said, Cobbler and OS 9 Gen and the like. There's a whole lot of ways to create an OS 9 boot file. But for you guys, we're going to do it the easy way and the fun way. So I've got my system master in drive 0. I've got my basic 09 config and boot disk in drive 1. And I'm going to chx d1 cmds. That's my execution directory, data directory. OK, we're going to type config. I realize I just prattled on a lot, but there's a lot to this. And OK, we have a 2-drive system. The source disk, that's where my modules are. That's going to be drive D1. The destination disk, that's where I want to write everything to. That's going to be drive D0. And don't worry, it will ask me to replace the system master when necessary. So now it's going to go through, build a list of drivers and descriptors based on what's in the modules directory of that disk. That's why we copied the development system hard drive modules over. And by the way, while this is building the descriptor list, the only not period correct piece of this, aside from the fact that the disks, the blank disks, are fairly new, is there is a DREM inside my hard drive. I only have one primary drive with a working bubble. Again, realities, folks, but this is as close as I could get, and the experience is exactly the same. So I'm going to have some caveats at the end of this that comes with using emulators that you're going to want to pay attention to because they will be important for OS 9. But for now, let's just enjoy the experience. And I am sorry that the video is just absolutely terrible. Hard drives, or the floppy drives over there. Okay, here we go. So now I can S to select or unselect a module here. I definitely want the printer. T1 is the Bitbanger serial port. T2 is my Deluxe RS-232 pack. I want that. Don't have modem 1, don't have modem 2. I usually include pipe. Now, I could use this opportunity to change drive 0 from 35 track to 40 track since I have an FD502. For the sake of this exercise, I'm not going to do that. And honestly, with a hard drive, do I really GAF? I DGAF, friends. Okay. So right arrow takes me to the next screen. And now we see some better stuff. So I have D1 on there too, right? Yes, I do. D0. I want D1. Got to have, otherwise I'll lose my second drive. There we go. Now, normally you would select DDD0 35S. That's the default drive for the DD descriptor in OS 9 Level 2. Again, Level 1 users, you may not need to worry about this. But I don't want that. I want my hard drive. So we're going to include hard drive as DDH0, so 35 meg hard drive. And we're going to do H0 35 meg. That'll give me my H0 drive descriptor and module to allow me to use the hard drive with the CC3H disk driver. Now you'll notice CC3H disk isn't listed. The descriptors list within them which driver file is needed for them to work. So it will automatically get pulled in as part of this. All right, I think we're done. I have my 3 serial devices, or 2.5 serial devices, my 2 drives, my pipe, and my 2 hard drives. We're going to hit D for done. Yes, I'm sure. All right. Because of the crappy video capture, we're going to do term VDG. Term win is a 40-column green on, black on green window. Okay, I want all of my window descriptors here. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Got to have the window descriptors done. Yes. Okay, now we're going to build the boot list. And while that's going, I'm going to grab my disk back, because I'm going to need that disk I just formatted. Now we have 60 hertz Merkin power. Merca. Place a formatted disk in drive D0. Okay, out comes the system master. In goes that disk we just formatted. Press a key. Now, I do know the config utility for OS 9 level 1 version 2 is a little pickier about which drive it's in. I'm pretty sure you have to run that from drive D0. So level 2 fixed some of the eccentricities of level 1's config, but it largely works the same way. What it's going to do now is it's going to generate the OS 9 boot file, and it's going to write it to drive D0. And then it's going to ask me for the system master disk so it can copy the commands over if I want them. But hold that thought. Which admittedly isn't ideal, but whatever. Okay, now this is where I mentioned the system master disk. I can do no commands, stop now. I can do the full command set, or I can individually select commands. Well, here's the thing. When OS 9 boots, everything's going to be on the hard disk when I'm done. Why do I want to waste the time copying the commands to disk? And if I need the commands, I've got the system master. So we're going to say, no commands, stop now. Must have graph drives in the command directory. Fine. Fair enough. Made that note for me, now I know. Okay, let's pull out our OS 9 hard disk boot disk. Now, you might be tempted to just go hit the reset button and just make yourself boot up your hard disk. Well, here's the problem. OS 9, I mentioned you want to put the OS 9 hard drive descriptor and driver in the boot file because OS 9 has a little trick up its sleeve. And that is, while it's booting, RBF will go out and look for a hard drive. And if it finds one, it will change the default execution directory and the default working directory to H0 and H0/CMDS. So you definitely want to go through the process of making your own boot file. Otherwise, you have to do it in your startup file. I mean, it's 2 commands, but come on, let OS 9 do the work for you. But again, because it's going to pull that trick off, it's going to go looking for the hard drive, and when it's not formatted, it's not going to be happy about it. So now what we have to do before we reboot is we have to format the hard drive. First things first, I'm going to reestablish. Okay. Whenever you switch disks around and you're about to work with things for more than just a copy, you really should tell OS 9, hey, reread the directory. Go set this up. It will save you some pain later. Okay. Now, we have to load the hard drive module and the CC3H disk driver, which, as you recall, are still on drive D1. Now, I think I could just load the descriptor and it would load the driver, but I don't want to take the chance. H035.dd. Okay. Now let's do a little module directory, mdir. Okay, and see what we have. And there we are. H0 and CC3H disks. Now at this point, I'm going to link H0. We should be ready to format it. Pro tip. Before you format your hard drive, especially if you're going to do the sector verification, you're going to want to turn off the default pause behavior on the terminal. As you just saw, it pauses halfway through. It will stop, and then you're going to have to babysit this thing every couple of minutes. So that's easy to do on this version of OS 9. tmode-pause. There we go. Now if I run the module directory, it should just scroll by. There we go. Now that we've got that, okay, color computer formatter. Formatting drive H0. You are formatting a hard disk. Yes or no? Now I could tell it, there's format options, I could tell it to tell I'm ready. Are you sure? You're formatting a hard disk, it says. Warning! Yes. Both physical and logical format. The answer to this question is yes, yes, always yes. Why? Because if you're coming from another drive or another disk format, like the Xenix, the sector numbers start with 1, OS 9 starts its with 0. Just format it. And this comes to another caveat, which I'll point out, I'll talk about a little more later. You have to make sure that if you're using a drive emulator, as I am, in your primary drive enclosure, that you have it configured to the disk geometry that OS 9 expects. And we'll talk more about that. So I'm going to say yes. And now it's off to the races. It's doing the physical format, and I can see through the case there. My activity light is blinking active for writes. It's going to write this out, and this actually won't take very long. Okay, we're prompted for the disk name here. I'm going to call this OS9L2 HD. Enter. Okay, physical verify desired. The answer to this question is yes. This is going to take a while. Now, if you're using an emulator, you could probably tell it no, honestly. But you really should, you know, especially if you're using a physical bubble, because then OS 9 will mark bad sectors in its directory. So we're going to say yes. And again, this is why you undid the T-mode pause option, because if you didn't, this would fill up, and you would have to come down and babysit it. Okay, this is going to take quite a while, so enjoy watching it on high speed. All right, folks, we're back. I fast-forwarded most of that for you. Cheers, it's late enough in the day now. I get a glass of wine. I realize I'm playing with fire here. We'll be careful. This won't be the first time, won't be the last time, until I spill something into a computer, of course. But, yeah, figured, you know what, a fancy CoCo setup like this, I know longtime viewers of the channel now, I tend to go for the bourbons and the scotches and the, you know, the brown liquors. But sometimes I like a good glass of wine. And this is a nice fancy Cabernet. And it is rather tasty. And I think an upscale CoCo system such as this deserves the wine treatment, the upscale treatment. So here we go. Okay, let's get this away from my hands so I don't spill it. Okay, so while this is finishing up, we have a few more minutes. It's been about half an hour since I started the fast forward with music. This is going to finish up, and then we're going to do a couple of extra things before we reboot and try our boot disk up. Try our boot disk out. Up. I swear this is my first glass of wine, friends, and I haven't even gotten through it yet. Yeah, so we're going to want to do one more thing before we get to rebooting and trying out the boot disk, and then we'll have the kind of complete end-to-end CoCo system, and then we'll talk a little bit about it, and maybe we'll futz around a little more with my nice bit of bougie hard drive goodness. Now, I was mentioning before drive geometry, and one of the important things about this, if you're using an emulator like a DREM or a David Guesswine emulator, both recommended, both I have, you're going to want to pay close attention to the geometry settings of your emulated drive image. So physical drive users, you should just be able to put the thing in, format it, what have you. But if you're taking one of these primary drives from another system, particularly if you're taking it from one of the 8-inch systems and Xenix, you're going to have to make some adjustments. And that's because sector size on the 8-inch systems tends to be 512. On the color computer, it's 256 bytes per sector. Additionally, the first sector number on the 8-inch systems is sector number 1, whereas OS 9 is going to try and format it as sector 0. So if you just take, for example, a DREM with an image from a Model 12 or a Model 16 with Xenix over, and you try and format it with OS 9 and you don't make any changes, the emulator is going to balk. It's going to tell you that you're trying to access an illegal sector because OS 9 is going to look for sector 0. So that is going to be an issue. So as you can see on your screen now, this is the drem.ini configuration file I have for the DREM that's powering this primary drive. If you're using a David Guesswine, you're going to want to do the same kind of thing. The most important part here is for the 35 meg drive, if you try to emulate what I've done here and use the existing device descriptor, you're going to want 512 heads, 8 sides. Now, the manual, the appendix in the OS 9 Level 1 version 2 manual says that the number of sectors per track is 34. OS 9's descriptor claims otherwise, it's apparently 32. So just keep that in mind. You're not going to get a full 35 megs. It's right around 32 megs. And as you're going to see at the end of this, I wonder if that's a function of OS 9, or at least this implementation of the driver. So that's something to keep in mind. You're going to want to use for the DG, you're going to want to use the -- sectors option to do 34,0 instead of 17,1. So that's really it. Just make sure the drive geometry is correct, and you should be in pretty good shape. Honestly, the emulators at this point are pretty much necessary. Like I said, I've got one working drive bubble, and it's an old ST225. Now, if you want to use a different size drive, or you have an existing bubble that doesn't match the specs of either the 15 or the 35 meg drive device descriptors that Radio Shack provides, you're going to need to customize the device descriptor. So there you are. Those of you who are watching this part, if you want to see that, I do have an ST225, about 21 meg drive, in another primary drive with the WD1000-TB1 controller. If you'd like to see that, let me know. Maybe we'll try and modify the device descriptor with mod patch and see if we can boot from it. Who knows? Maybe it'll work. I'm betting not. Now, the descriptor is documented in the manual, in the OS 9 Level 1 V2 manual, so maybe we'll get lucky, but who knows? Anyway, I wanted to touch on that while we had some time. I know this video has been a whole lot of me talking, like all my videos, but it is an important caveat. Actually, what else do I have in the caveats department? I just realized I left my phone upstairs. So we're going to look here. Okay, what are the other caveats I had for y'all? Geometry. I talked about the sectors per track. I talked about patching the descriptor. And we already talked about the controller. Wow, look at me go. So I don't script, I don't script these. But I do, for the longer videos, for things like this, and like when I did the OS2 remote boot thing and the Windows 95 one, and some of the VIS stuff, I do kind of storyboard them out, at least do points that I want to touch, because otherwise I get ahead of myself and forget things. So that's why you see me looking at my laptop over there quite a bit. Between that and OBS running, because that's what we're shooting this through. That's it. Interesting little fun fact too. Man, that really looks terrible. I'm looking at it on the screen. I'm sorry. But I gotta stare at this, and the old eyes, they ain't getting any better. I'm gonna get the CM8 to myself, so, but man, that just looks like ass. Well, consider me sorry, friends. But this is, like I said, something I've always wanted to do. And I kind of hope now that you're watching this, you have a better appreciation. You know, I love the CoCo SDC. I'm not boo-hooing it, but as you're going to see when we start to actually try and move into this drive a little bit, it's so easy to CoCo now. It's great. It expands and makes it more accessible to a wider audience, and that is fabulous. I like that it brings more people in, and it gives them the power and flexibility of configurations like this and more, but it does so much more easily, and that's magic, and I love it, and that's my day-to-day daily driver for the color computer. But honestly, there is an inherent joy for me in doing this, in setting the machine up and interacting with the operating system in ways that we tend not to anymore, because like it or not, that was a big portion of CoCoing back in the day. Making backups of things, making custom boot disks with customized OS 9 boot files, and all this stuff that's doesn't really get done much, right? If you have a CoCo SDC and you don't have floppy drives, and I was talking about the step rate earlier on the FD502, you used to do that. You used to patch for that. Hell, I've got programs that I took from various magazines, Hot CoCo, The Rainbow, etc., to use side 2 of these drives as another drive. It remapped the drive command. Things like that. Like, that was day-to-day life for the CoCo, right? Nowadays, if I want to take a backup, I take the SD card out of my CoCo SDC and I throw it in my laptop and I copy it. Easy peasy. Control-C, Control-V it. If you're a I need the mouse kind of person, then, well, you've got that too, right? Like, no problem. You do you. So the great thing about the easy button hardware, I realize that sounds derogatory, but it's not, is that it does allow a fair amount of, it allows everyone to CoCo the way they want, and that's great. So, and again, this whole project, I mentioned earlier, if you're not, in the CoCo community or doing stuff with them, you should, and the answer is you really should. Watch the CoCo Nation live show on the weekends. I do ads for them sometimes. In fact, I'm overdue. What can I do? I've got one where I'm pointing the soldering iron in the camera. I got one where I bought a... Oh, I know what I'm going to do. I just figured it out. I've got one where I did a Bob Ross, the joy of paint. I forget, the joy of painting, I think it was, or whatever it is. I did a CoCo version. Glued cartridges to a palette, and I probably should put those up on the channel at this point, but I kind of leave them as exclusives for the CoCo Nation. So maybe I'll put the old ones up when the new one comes in, and I'll leave the new one to be exclusive. And my favorite one that I literally did on a whim one Wednesday or Thursday evening, I made one of those Sally Struthers, like, Learning Institute ads that she used to do, you know. You can major in accounting, business administration, computers, blah, 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 and the whole list is scrolling by her. I did one of those. I said the idea out loud to my wife, just kind of blurted it out over dinner, finished my dinner, came running down here and went and did it. So, yeah, you watch the CoCo Nation live show if just to watch me do stupid ads. Usually they air my longer CoCo Nation one with Sally Struthers. I don't dress up like Sally Struthers. That was a bridge too far. But I think I know what my next one's going to be. I have the costume for it. Now everyone on the CoCo Nation is like, what the hell is he going to do? Again, I haven't even finished the first glass of wine, friends. This is just me. All right, we're getting close to the end of this. You're going to see why I think they went to 32 sectors of track. That's kind of why I wanted to mention it. You're going to get a little bit of fun at the end. By the way, when you go to format these drives, I don't know if it's a function of the emulator or the controller or what. Sometimes OS 9 will throw an error 246 at you when you first run format after you load the driver and descriptor. 246 for the uninitiated is not ready, drive not ready. If you run it again, if you do hit that, just run it again. The formatter will pop up. If it doesn't, then something's not talking. So, another caveat. I didn't put the RS-232 pack and the speech sound pack in when I first did the setup video, and then did it like after the fact. I forgot to mention, the speech sound pack will not work with OS 9 level 2 without modification. You have to, 2 megahertz messes it up, but if you're running OS 9 level 1 software, like the Interbank Incident, for example, under level 1, it should work just fine. But just as a point of fact, I'm sure there are folks like, oh, you can't do that without, it's going to mess it up, it's 2 megahertz. Yeah, you're right. You're right. If you're running OS 9 level 2 or Nitrous 9 level 2. But if you're on a CoCo 1, or if you're running an OS 9 level 1 where it runs at, you know, 0.78 or 0.89 megahertz, not 1.78, don't sweat it. All right, have I stretched for time enough, friends? I think we have. We're at FD. I'm going to try not to spill wine. I've got 2 other CoCos, but I'd rather not have to dig them out. Oh, that's good. I have 2 other CoCo 3s, I should say. One just came back from the dead. I borked it when I was trying to do a socket for the 6809, and it's why I'm now a believer in destructive removals. These CoCo 3 boards are so easy to lift traces on, friends. Okay, here we go. E, F. Number of good sectors, 0. I'm pretty sure that's an overflow, given that we ended right at FFF. So I suspect that the problem here, and the reason why we're at 32 sectors per track and not 34, this is a guess, there is no education to this at all, is because that's as far as we could go, about 32 megs. So if you know, let me know in the comments, or if you're on the Discord or something. I would love to know if that's right, or if I'm just full of it, because that's also possible. Okay, so what do we do now? Well, now we should have a working hard drive H0. And we do. Look at that. And let's see how it's free on it. We should get the number of free sectors. And this, I think, will work. Yep, there we go. And yeah, 131072. That's a really round number. So I think that's what happened. I think that's why we capped out at 32. Anyway, we have 139.99 free sectors, largest block, of course, 139.99. It's the whole damn disk. OS 9L2 HD. Okay. Now, I mentioned that I didn't want to copy the command set over to the hard drive system disk, and with good reason. Why am I going to do that when I can use something like dsave, and I can copy all the files? Now, for the uninitiated, dsave is an interesting little enigma. Copying bulk files, recursively copying the directories and subdirectories in OS 9 is not as nice as it is in other operating systems. And I think this is one of those commands that people interact with and go, OS 9 is hard. And with good reason. So we're going to load that. And I will run the help command on it just so you can see what it does. OS 9, even level 2, does have a pretty nice help file in it. So what dsave is going to do here is, I'll just demonstrate. dsave is going to generate a script or procedure file in OS 9 parlance that will change into each of the directories on a source disk. And it will copy and generate the list of commands to change into those directories, copy all the files in, and then move around. It'll make the directories in the target side and everything like that. Now, you can tell it with -m not to include the make dir commands in case the directories already exist. Always nice. It has some major caveats. So, for example, the biggest bite is that most OS 9 programs come with the common utilities and commands duplicated on each disk. So, for example, if you get Carmen Sandiego, it's going to have some of the OS 9 commands in the CMDS directory. They're going to come with OS 9 level 2. Well, when you run the procedure file that it goes to create, it's going to get to that one where it already exists. It's not going to replace it. It's going to give you an error 218, and the procedure is going to balk and exit. So it is a little interesting, and even using it is a little interesting. And this is where I mentioned before working data directory and working execution directory. So your PWD, your working data directory, which is not loaded, and your PXD, your execution directory. That first one is what's going to matter for dsave. Where you are is going to influence where dsave looks when it builds its list. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to do dsave -s 24. Now, the -s option is going to tell it to set the copy size of the buffer to the number of kilobytes. I'm going to use 24K. This is the equivalent when dsave generates the commands of typing copy whatever #24K, for those of you familiar with that, OS 9. So let's do this. I'm on D0, that's what I want. First thing it's going to do is do the command to pause. It's going to load copy. It's going to make these. Now, let's copy it from D0 CMDS to attrib. Okay, stop this. When it's done, stop. This didn't do anything. It just printed the commands to the screen. This just generates the procedure file. So to actually create the script that's going to copy it, I'm going to pipe it out, or redirect it, I should say. I'm going to redirect the output to a file. And let's put that right on the hard drive where we're going to be, h0/dsave.out. Now, while this is running, you may have already started typing the fact that OS 9 does support pipes, ! I could pipe it directly to the shell. And yes, you can do that. I could do dsave -s24 pipe shell, and I could run that from and point that to H0, and I could be fine. There's ways to do that. However, it is important to note that you don't get any control over what it's doing, and you don't get to see it. And again, if you're going to have duplicates and stuff, it's not going to play nice. So you really do want to take it, run your output to a text file like this, dsave.out, and then all I have to do is go and run dsave.out, and I'm going to have my files in place. So we're going to move this disk over. This will copy my sys directory, my commands directory, and I've got a couple of window scripts that come with OS 9 level 2 for a 38-column window, and another one. I think it's going to copy the startup file over. So it should copy all of the contents of drive D0 over to H0. Of course, this isn't actually doing it. This is just generating the procedure file. Okay, dsave's all done. So now, if I look at my hard drive directory here, there's dsave.out. And there we are. So copy #24K, like I mentioned, D0 CMDS build to the current directory. Wherever you run, whatever your current data directory is, that's where it's going to go. Okay, so we're going to go over to H0, and we're going to run dsave.out. And as you recall from what's on the screen there, it's just going to copy from D0 down to H0, and it's going to create all the directories for us and everything like that. And here we go. And this is going to take some time. And there we are, all copied down. So at this point, it's time to test out that boot disk we made earlier and see if we have ourselves a full-on hard disk system. So I'm going to remove both my config and basic 09 disk and my system master from the drives. Now, a CoCo hard disk system is going to need a boot floppy, which is what we just made. So it's not like a Model 12 or 16 or like a Model 2 or a PC where you can just boot up from the hard disk from BASIC. You can't do that from a configuration you bought from Radio Shack. You can't do that. Let's put it that way. I'm going to put the disk in. I'm going to hit the reset button. The OS 9 boot files were different. Let's start from scratch. Play with fire doing things like that. Yep, there we go. We're going to fix this mess because obviously the date and time, OS 9 level 2, not going to be a thing. But here we are. As you noticed, it didn't go back to the floppy drive to load the shell. PXD, PWD, DIR. There we are. If I DIR assist, and of course it's much faster now. Look at this. And if I dir/dd, that is my hard drive, dd the default drive, which does matter for commands like error. So for example, error 215, bad path name. Or if I do help error. Error or no. Outputs text error messages for given error numbers. So there we go. We now have a functioning OS 9 system. At this point, I can take my boot disk out. I'm done with it. Once the system's booted, this is like if you had one of these drives on a Model 4 or a Model 3 with LDOS or LS-DOS, same kind of thing. Once the boot disk has got the operating system up, you're done. Now, one thing I do want to do is I want to configure the startup file. I want to take out the date and time prompt, and this is an RGB monitor, and it defaults to the composite type. That explains the purple cursor. I'll show you. Our mon type R. Okay, let's build ourselves a custom startup file, make this a little nicer. All right, I'm going to rebuild my startup file. The OS 9 does have a line editor that I hate, so I'm just going to del it and rebuild it. Okay, so let's do this. Build startup. Link shell, mon type R, enter. Perfect. Okay. Now this time, I should get the actual correct startup. And I'm just going to boot it from scratch because sometimes the warm boot doesn't play nice. I don't know if that's just, if it's hard drive specific, usually it just kind of works, but just in case, we'll just go from the cold boot because that always seems to work. There we go. Welcome to OS 9 Level 2 on TJB Chris's HD CoCo 3. Life in HD. It's pretty good, friends. And now, just to kind of show you, so again, I still have D0. I still have my drive there, and of course, there's no startup file. There's nothing but OS 9 boot. All this disk will do is boot the system. Okay. So now, of course, you want to move other software into this thing. And for other programs, that's going to be another video, because honestly, we've gone on long enough. That took you less time to watch than it did me, but it did finish copying. So now we should be completely moved in from an operating system standpoint. Now, I'm not going to get into other applications other than the development kit, which we're going to do now. But anyway, let's move the development system in, but I don't want to merge it in with my main OS 9 files, at least not yet. So for example, if I want to put the development system in there, but I don't want the commands in the path, or I want to have a little separate area for it, I can do that. So what's my PWD? My working directory is H0. All right, so if I look at my hard drive directory, let's make a directory called DevTool. DevTools. Okay. Now, let's also del dsave.out. Okay. Now we have a DevTools directory. What I can do now is I can take my disk 3, chd d0, not dh0, and I can do this, dsave-s24. I want the makdir commands this time, the makdir commands, and we're going to do this too, h0 devtools dsave.out. lo and behold, it is done. So let us go to, and now we should have a nice, and this will do it all. So dsave.out. And now here we go. We're going to make and copy all these files, and I'll see you on the other side. Okay, there's that. And now on to the other disk, or the other side, depending on how your development kit was packaged. Mine actually came on a flippy disk. I thought there was it's just a shadow of the floppy drive. I thought there was something on my disk. Okay, so let's do this. Del dsave.out. Go back to D0, where I want to dsave from. All right, we'll generate this file. Now let's list dsave.out. Okay. Bin xdump, xbin, login. There's my login. Make term. Mod patch is already on there. Mon type is on there. Save, I think, is, I don't know if save's on there. tsmon, verify, rma, rlink. So help message and error message are probably going to have to come over, so I'll delete the existing ones. Logbook, message of the day. Password, Scred. Scred is a screen editor that comes with the development kit. It's slightly better than edit. Term set. Okay, so the commands are going to be the issue. Let's see if I got this right. All right, here we go. And there we are. We're all copied. So now, in this directory, I have del dsave.out. I have the development system. So if I wanted to use it like I was using the development system without the other OS9 commands, I could load what I want. Of course, they're always right there if I want to fully qualify the path. I can go chx d0, h0, sorry, dev tools, cmds, chd h0 dev tools. So now, of course, I have my development kit, and it's like I'm living within the development kit, just like if I had changed the disk in drive 0 and did a chx d0, cmds, chd d0. Be exactly like that. So I have, of course, all of my various utilities and things. I can run any of them. You know, make, it'll tell me there's no make file, I think. Or it's just going to do nothing. Oh, there we go. Can't open make file because there's no make file. Right? I can tell it to sleep. Oh, it did. Touch this. Touch this. Ah. Now we're going to do that right. There we go. Just like the Unix command. Now we have this. Okay. There we go. By the way, OS9, del command, some others. You can specify more than one option. I know some of you are like, why can't you just wildcard that? Yeah, that's not a thing with commands like copy or anything. Like, yeah, that doesn't like it. Star is part of the name. It's not a wildcard. So, nice try. Now, I'm going to imagine, I don't know what the third-party utility situation was like for OS9. I'm going to imagine there was quite a bit. But I didn't have that much connection with OS9 outside of what Radio Shack offered, unfortunately. I'm going to imagine that there were utilities to overcome this. Even now, Nitrous 9 does make it easier to deal with things like files and bulk files and things like that to some degree. But any assumptions you have coming from a DOS or a NIX system, put that jump to conclusions matter away. Don't even bother. No. You probably take something for granted that you're not thinking you're taking for granted. That's not a knock at OS9. I love OS9. But it is a different world. As I said earlier, it's an entirely different kind of flying altogether. So, what else can you do with a bougie OS9 hard disk system? Like, look at this thing. It's great. I mean, other than play games on it. But this is great. What's one of the greatest things you can do with a CoCo and kind of the way to get the most bang for your buck? With a CoCo, with a hard disk, and everything in one place, and you don't have to swap disks. So after a little reset, the way that you turn your bougie OG hard drive CoCo 3 setup with development system into an even better system is you add a terminal. This is the Tandy DT100, rebranded Wise WI55. It is an awesome terminal, and what you do is you add this to the serial port, and you can either have people log into it, or as I'm going to do, you just start a shell on it and run multiple things at the same time. Now you can do this on your CoCo using OS9's Windows if you've got OS9 level 2 on the CoCo 3, But even on a CoCo 1 or 2, you can drop a terminal onto the Deluxe RS-232 pack and it will work. Now, you can use the bit banger. It will be slow and performance on your CoCo won't be great because it's bit banging all those serial port bits. And again, I could do the multi-user thing. I did a video on OS 9 Level 2 multi-user quite a few years ago, Badink card, using my Apple II as a terminal. This time we're going to use the DT100, and I'm not going to go into the details of it. If you want to see more about that, go watch that old video. And just think it's even rougher around the edges than this one is, friends, because that was a long time ago. Anyway, let's do this. So, the Deluxe RS-232 pack, as you remember when I did the config and created the boot disk for the hard drive, the module for that should already be in the OS 9 boot file. In fact, we can take a look. And there it is, T2, an ACIA pack. That's the driver for the Deluxe RS-232 pack. So, the default baud rate, I believe, should already be 9600, which is what this is set to. So I should be able to say shell I equals / T2 ampersand. And there we go. I have a shell. And I can do things on the shell. Let's flip over to the DT100. And now you can't see the CoCo screen at the moment. But now I have all the commands here I want. MDIR. I can run basic 09. Oops, I can also screw up typing it, so OS 9 is either going to run that or throw an error. Error 215, yeah, because I thought I wanted to run that. But here I'm in basic 09. Let's exit. Or buy, is it buy? Yeah, okay. I never remember. Now I'll get the copyright. Now this terminal doesn't use the same sequence to clear, so OS 9, like out of the box, does not have like a term cap like you might be used to on the Nixes and things. But that's a thing that kind of got glommed on, and later OS 9 for 68000s did have a term cap type interface. So anyway, basic 09 RS version, copyright 1980. Again, right there. We've got all the good stuff, everything we could ever want on a separate terminal. And again, I can go back to my CoCo, as I'm going to do right now. Tmode -pause. Same here. And now I can list sys err-msg and list sys help msg. If I enter at the same time, there we go. That's multitasking, friends. Multitasking. Do that on your Commodore 64. Okay, I'm not really trying to troll Commodore, folks, but honestly, I think the CoCo gets the short shrift sometimes, and this is the kind of thing that, you know, people would look at it and go, yeah, it doesn't have a sound, it doesn't have a synth chip, it doesn't make cool sounds. But at the same time, I think things like this, OS 9 Level 2 is much more, I think, a better example of it, just because with the extra memory on the CoCo 3 and the MMU, you have more flexibility with it than you might with, say, a CoCo 1 or 2. But you still can do this on a CoCo 1 or 2, and it's very useful. And if you're a developer of one, but you want multiple screens, this is fabulous. Set up your DT100, use your main CoCo, and you are good to go, right? Right. Well, that's a pretty good bougie CoCo system, and I'm sure this video is way too long. I've been shooting it for 4 hours now. But we're not done yet. I've got one more thing. We're going to harken back to something I said in the shopping segment. You know, this. And not for nothing, it is OS 9 related. You can boot OS 9 from a CCR81. Ask me how I know. So yeah, when I said that, I was kind of doing that to see what would happen. I wondered if someone would throw me a comment or something and be like, oh, TJB Chris, OS 9 is a disk operating system. It's 4 disks. On the CoCo, mainly. Not entirely. I did demonstrate ages ago the OS 9 Level 2 in ROMKit, and that led to why the CCR81 is going to be relevant. Well, I'm not going to go into the whole bit of it. You're just going to have to see what I mean. So what we're going to do here, we're going to turn this off. We're going to disconnect the hard drive. In fact, I'm just going to take the multi-pack interface right out here, and we're going to turn off my FD502 so I don't overheat it. Disconnect the DT100 and just chuck the cable on the floor there. And we're going to take this and put it right here. Okay, now I'm going to flip you over to the other camera. And now we're going to disconnect everything but the cassette recorder. No mouse, no joystick, just my video capture and the CCR81. And now, watch as we boot OS 9 from a cassette. let's go back to our VIS, our CoCo 3. That's the VIS option on my OBS setup here. And look, we've got, I did this, I'll talk about this. You're going to do this in real time, no cuts. This is a Tandy certified cassette. It says OS 9 level 2 on it. Again, no cartridges, no nothing. I'm reprising this just because I can, and honestly, I'll explain while it's loading. This is going to take a couple of minutes. Make sure I got my volume set right. I think I do. Push play. All right, C load, M, go. Okay. While this loads, and hopefully the tape volume is correct, this is a project I did a bunch of years ago. It is the single greatest, most interesting thing I've ever done. It is my favorite thing I've ever done with any of the computers in this room, and I've done a lot of stuff. Back at that time, the channel was, I definitely had a penchant for what I would call doing stupid, useless things with Tandy computers. I still kind of do that, see the Microsoft Wine Guide. But this was one where somebody asked in the CoCo Facebook group if OS 9 could run on a cassette. Innocent question. And I thought, well, actually, I thought the equivalent of what they actually said on CoCo Talk, what the CoCo Nation live show was back then, when they said this.
It's a great exercise in hold my beer, right? Somebody says, can that be done? Hold my beer, right? And here it is.
I was like, this seems like something I could do. So if you want to see the video on it, I did a whole video on it. I did a whole descriptive thing, go here, where I talk about the detail of this. This was not a trivial exercise, and no, this will never be available. It is finicky. It doesn't work in the emulators. Got to have the hardware config just right, and quite frankly, I don't want to support it, and it doesn't do anything practical. And some things I just get to keep to myself, friends. So anyway, I think I can do this. So I rewrote the OS 9 boot module, and I wrote a procedure I called pre-rel. Rel is the relocation routine for OS 9 that loads everything up into memory when the DOS command is executing and it's getting itself lined up to bootstrap, get the boot file in place, verify the modules. It relocates everything. That's rel. I wrote a pre-rel module that would basically do what the DOS command does, line everything up, and then jump to the right place after you loaded it from tape. This was a tight fit because I had to fit it between the top of, or the bottom, like the top of just over the graphics screen memory, wherever I could fit it, and end below disk basic because the CoCo 3 runs in all RAM mode. So if I had too much data or made OS 9 too big or loaded it too far into the memory map, it would overwrite extended basic while the cassette was loading and the computer would crash. And I couldn't find any cassette software to write multi-part binaries like you could in Load End Magic, another old video on the CoCo. And so I ended up having to make it one big contiguous file, which I did. Pulled my hair out for 2 weeks with the emulator because it wasn't working. Then I thought, I've had problems with emulators before. I should just try on the real hardware. And I did. And well, it worked. The counter's going to get up to about 54. We're at 43 right now. And there we are. And again, this has been done before. I'm only showing it because it got brought up. Thanks, Curtis. And honestly, this is my single most fun thing, and I think the thing I'm most proud of. I really like that I did this. It has no practical purpose. I figure someday if I go to like CoCo Fest or something, I'll take the tape and just troll the show by booting OS 9 on people's cassette CoCo 3s, providing they have 512K in there because it needs 512K. But it is a fun little accomplishment. And this is real. It's not fake. It's not some basic program pretending to be OS 9. Okay, let's stop this so I don't pancake my tape. And if I have my volume control set correctly, OS 9 boot, we get a little screeny flash. I should get the copyright message. There we are. Again, I've got some modules in here. This never gets old. I did this years ago, and here it is. I can display C. If I type right, display the beep code, beep. I have a RAM drive, as you saw in the module directory there. You need a default drive, so I have the RAM drive is there. It is not actually because the module didn't load. So if I go to do a dir, it's going to. Oh no, it's there. Oh yep, RAM. There it is. Okay, DD and RAM. I didn't see RAM. If I can write files to it, I can do mdir. I'm going to do dd rummy buzzard. Now if I dir, I'm going to see rummy buzzard. I can't list it because I didn't include the list command in my modules. There was only so many modules I could get in here, so I just kind of fit what I could. Now, interestingly enough, I guess you could probably put the hard drive modules in there, start OS 9 from a tape, and then use the hard drive. No, I'm not going to do that. But this is based on the OS 9 Level 2 ROM kit. I took that as my basis, and I made a copy of OS 9, we'll rewind my tape, that, yeah, you can start from a tape. So I think that's going to do it. I think I've droned on long enough, but I hope this was interesting. I really wanted to live this configuration, and it still is so much fun to use OS 9 with an real old Radio Shack hard disk setup through the Tandy hard drive controller. It's a kind of magic I never thought I'd get to experience, and I want to thank Brian Weasler again for lending me this and letting me play with it. I'll have it for a little bit more time, but I want to get it back to him fairly soon. So if you want to see the CoCo 1 do this, I can set that up just for the heck of it. We'll set the CoCo 1 up in place of the 3, put OS 9 Level 1 version 2 on there. It's pretty much the same process, but we can do that. I can also go through some installs, things like Interbank Incident or some other programs like that if you'd like to see that kind of thing. And if not, hey, that's fine too. I do still have some VIS content I want to cover. I want to get the dev cards back in the 4833 LXT, and I want to see if I can run some retail software on those dev cards, because that's where we left off last with that, and then I can get those cards back to Tandy Showcase. So I want to get those done. Well, okay, I don't want to give the serial loader card back. But I'm gonna miss that card. I really like it. But all those need to go back. I need to get these things back to their respective homes. So they're kind of nerve-wracking to have around in my care. But yeah, that's going to do it. So this is OS 9 OG hard drive setup. I hope this was useful or at least interesting. I hope for those of you that are used to the modern devices, you can at least sympathize or empathize with my perspective that we can't really know how good we have it unless we see what things were like back then. And things back then were a lot more tedious. Until next time, I'm TJB Chris, coming to you from the kids' table of YouTube in my little corner of the internet, and I will see you next time.